Lausanne, the fourth largest city in Switzerland and the only Swiss city that has a metro system. From here on, we'll be traveling on board of a ferry to Évian-les-Bains in France. Even though you find many train connections from Lausanne to France and also other international and obviously domestic destinations, along this specific route, the ferry makes a lot of sense, even though Switzerland is a landlocked country. I'll explain you all in this video. Join me on this international ferry from a landlocked country to France, from Switzerland to France, here along Lake Léman. But if you take a ferry in the middle of the lake and you need to be exactly at the other side, it makes a kind of sense. I'll show you all in this video. For now, let's just roll the intro. Earlier that same day, I arrived in Switzerland from Vienna by railjet train. That train took me to Zurich, and from Zurich I took an intercity train to Lausanne. When I recorded this video, I planned a lot of trip reports in one weekend, basically to make this YouTube channel as efficient as possible and also make it kind of break even. And finding a place to stay in Lausanne was possible. However, when I looked at the other side of the lake in France, hotel prices were way more affordable. And this also gave me an excuse to have 2 more videos, so I think it's a win-win situation. The main railway station of Lausanne is not very big, but it's not a small railway station either. There was some renovation works going on when I was here. I featured the railway station a couple of years ago in another trip report. However, I don't think that's really up to date anymore. Anyway, for this, at the front of the railway station, you find the access to the metro of Lausanne. I think you should also be able to reach the metro directly from the underground area of the railway station, but that's not what I did. Anyway, the metro station is not even that big, to be honest. We took line 2, what is a fully automatic metro line. And this metro line also runs on rubber tires. I took it to the final destination, what is Ouchy Olympique, if I pronounce it right. From here on, it's only a short walk to the lake shore, where you will find the ferries. And a lot of these ferries are not just for commuting, but a lot of them are also for more touristic purposes. Directions from the metro station have been marked crystal clear. I bought the ticket for the metro and for the ferry, by the way, at the website of the SBB, the state-owned railway company of Switzerland. When it comes to this, Switzerland is very well integrated with all the ticketing systems. I really like that. Unfortunately, Interrail, and if you're a non-European, Eurail, is not valid on the metro and also not on the ferries. Because I was traveling with Interrail for this trip, I obviously purchased individual tickets. The screen here gives information about departures for the ferries. And my ferry today departed from gate with the letter A. Like always when I'm traveling, I first try to see where my train, and in this situation ferry, departs from before I start to walk around. So I'm sure I won't miss it. For the ferry, I had a ticket that was for a specific time only, so if I missed this one, I have to purchase a new ticket and I don't want that. However, you will find some signs that are mentioning what way to go to, even though this is not a railway station, so in that sense the information is not extremely well. But it's still Switzerland and route information has been given pretty good in general. And today the ferry departed from this building over here. Right at the front of the building there is also something that can be used as a ticket counter, although it was closed when I was here, pretty late on a Saturday night. This actually seems like a kind of true terminal building. There's also a vending machine for tickets, but once again I purchased my ticket online. There's a small waiting area over here, a vending machine, and theoretically I think custom formalities can also take place over here. I mean, it's all very small, but the facilities are more than I expected at first. Right above this terminal building there is a big restaurant where you have a nice view on the lake. And for the ferry company you can even buy merchandises. Anyway, shortly before departure, it got a little bit busier, so I just also waited over here so I can film in an empty as possible ferry. After the ferry arrived, some staff of the ferry company opened the gates over here. But what I didn't really realize at this moment is that most people will not go through this way, but via an entrance at the side in the open air. This ferry is also being used for lots of people who just commute up and down between Switzerland and France. People who work in Switzerland but live in France, and I guess also the other way around. Although I can imagine that the other way around is less common along this route. Anyway, lots of people took this ferry the other way around, and for the trip I made from Lausanne to Évian, it was less crowded. Actually, I expected a ticket check before we entered the ferry. However, ticket check took place on board of the ferry. Today I was traveling on board of the ferry Léman, named after the lake where we are traveling on, Lake Léman, or Lac Léman in French, although I probably pronounced this wrong anyway. Even though in English it's pretty often called the Lake of Geneva. You will find two classes on board of this ferry, and even though all the railway trips around this journey were in second class, for this trip I purchased a first class ticket. However, if it's worth pay the extra amount for first class, I honestly don't know. I mean, the seats are definitely nicer, I'll show you in a bit. But second class is also good, and this ferry ride doesn't take that long either. Anyway, right here you see the main inside deck in second class. What is pretty fine, some basic seats, but what I like most is obviously the outside area over here. Throughout the ferry there are some screens as well that will host route information for connecting public transportation, mainly buses and some other ferries as well. Of course, you will also find toilets on board of this ferry, and I'll show you in a bit. I mean, no train tour is complete without showing you the toilets, and the same thing counts for the ferry obviously. There are quite some areas where you can sit outside, what is perfect on a summer day when I made this journey. At the upper deck there are some more seats, but this is for the second class all inside. It seemed like there are some spots on board of this ferry where you can buy some drinks and food as well, even though it was, I think, closed at the moment I made this journey, but maybe I didn't pay enough attention to this. This here is the first class area, and the seats here are way nicer and it's also less crowded for obvious reasons. I hope you like this video so far. If you do so, or if it's a helpful video to you, give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more trip reports about more sustainable ways of transportation, the main focus for this channel is long distance and or international traveling. Well, this is definitely international. And hit that subscribe button if you haven't done this already. Some questions, feedback, comments. If you just want to say hello, feel free to leave a comment. And for now, let's continue with this video. And let's head back to the first class where I just entered in. At the back of first class, you also find an outside area, where I had some difficulties by operating the door, but there's a button at the side for this. This is only for first class passengers and it's a little bit higher, what is actually nice for the views. But once again, I still think that second class on board of this ferry is a good product. The seats in first class are definitely nicer. You find a very small and unstable tray table in the seat in front of you, and there are power sockets at several spots. If the price difference is not that big, I think it's worth to pay for first class, but for regular tickets, honestly I don't think it's worth it. I mean, the ferry crossing on both of these ferries takes about half an hour, so it's not that long either. I also noticed a kind of ticket desk over here. I think if you didn't purchase a ticket you can still buy it here, but honestly I would just recommend to buy a ticket in advance. Toilets are located below deck. I think if you're traveling in a wheelchair, for example, this is not very easy. I mean, the toilets are fine, nothing really special. Actually, the toilets seems a bit outdated to me. The rest of this ferry, it's not a very modern ferry, but it's definitely not something I would consider as outdated. And I really like this connection, to be honest. Even though for long distance passengers between France and Switzerland, this is not the most serious way to travel. For this, let's take a close look on the route map for today. Basically, a railway map of the railway lines around Lac Léman or Lake of Geneva. And we are now in Lausanne and will travel to here in Évian. We can make the entire journey by train as well. At this very moment, I can only do this via Geneva. However, the other railway line east from Évian-les-Bains will be opened soon again as well, so you can also go eastbound soon. However, the lake is rather big, and no matter how you look at it, the ferry is just the fastest way to travel from Lausanne to Évian-les-Bains. The ferry only needs about half an hour, where if you make the same journey by train, you need at this moment 2 hours and 39 minutes. Maybe this will be a little bit shorter if you can also travel eastbound, but the train is just not the fastest way to travel along this route. And even though I'm mainly from an environmental point of view really into traveling by train and by foot, so this is a food passengers ferry, I think honestly it would also make a lot of sense if this ferry would take some cars, because there are also some cars that will need to go from one side of the lake to the other side. And if those cars have to drive less, there's also less pollution, I would say. And even though I can tell you from an experience point of view, the journey by train around the lake is really nice and enjoyable. I have videos that cover the entire length, by the way, I'll link them in the description of this video. I also really enjoyed the views from the ferry. About tickets, I purchased the tickets from the railway station of Lausanne until Évian-les-Bains via the Swiss state-owned railway company SBB, but you can also do this via Trainline. The Swiss state-owned railway company SBB has their booking system linked to Trainline. However, for the Léman Express trains that do operate directly between Geneva and Évian-les-Bains, it's a bit difficult to book those tickets. I have a video about those trains as well, and actually the next morning after I recorded this, I traveled with those trains back to Switzerland again. Anyway, for this specific ferry, even from the railway station of Lausanne to Évian-les-Bains, you can buy tickets via Trainline and SBB. Well, basically, SBB has most of their booking system linked to Trainline as well. And Trainline works perfectly within Europe. I do have an affiliate link to Trainline as well. You can find it in the description of this video. If you use that, you also support this channel a little bit. But you can also buy it directly at the website of SBB. If you buy the metro tickets via SBB or Trainline within Lausanne, that's for a specific time only. Keep this in account. However, the ferry tickets, if you have an open ticket for that specific day, you can take any ferry you like. But it's definitely worth to buy the tickets more in advance. In that situation, you pay for a specific ferry connection, so it's based on demand, and that can save you quite a lot of money. A normal full fare first class ticket will cost you, for example, 31 francs, while I paid for this journey 1860 in Swiss francs. However, if you buy these tickets more in advance, and I don't take any discount cards in consideration, you can have a super saver ticket for 11 francs in second class and 15 francs and 60 franc cents in first class. This is a discount of about 50% compared to the normal prices, because the full fare second class tickets are 22 francs and full fare first class tickets are 31 francs. The ticket will be, for the ferry at least, from Lausanne-Ouchy Lac to Évian-les-Bains Lac. Here, the ferry is arriving at Évian-les-Bains at the ferry terminal, so Évian-les-Bains Lac, so lake basically. You arrive right next to the town center. But public transportation from and to here, it's rather disappointing to be honest. And the railway station is not super close to this point either. Even though you do find some direct buses from the ferry terminal to the railway station though, but they are not that frequent, at least they didn't went at the moment I arrived here. What was at a Saturday night at around 8:30. The walk to the railway station is about 1.6 kilometers, and according to some planners, this is about 24 minutes walking. However, I stayed overnight over here because, well, what I already mentioned at the beginning of the video, sleeping here is much more affordable than staying somewhere in Switzerland. And even though I didn't spend that much time over here, I basically arrived here at night, went to sleep, well, of course had some dinner, and the next morning I left relatively early. Évian actually seems like a very nice town where I wouldn't mind to spend some more days. However, I do have a family at home as well, so I want to plan my trip reports as efficient as possible. So the next morning I took this train back to Switzerland again. Actually, at first I didn't know this was an international train, because in the planner it seems like there was a change at the railway station of Annemasse. But that wasn't the case, so I had another trip report. Anyway, I forgot to do the outro at the spot, so I'm doing it right now with a voiceover. I hope you liked this video and/or this has been helpful to you. If so, please leave a thumbs up on YouTube, I really appreciate that. If you have some questions, feedback or comments, feel free to, well, ask them and leave a comment, or even if you just want to say hello, feel free to do so, of course. And if you like to see more trip reports about more sustainable ways of transportation, the main focus for this channel is long distance and/or international traveling. Well, this is not a true long distance, but it's definitely international, then hit that subscribe button if you haven't done this already. Related videos can be found in the description of this video, and you also find an affiliate link to Trainline where you can buy tickets. Something else you find in the description of this video is a link to a map where you find our videos as well, but then on a map. And the example you see over here is not really up to date. There are many more lines at this moment already. See you on the next one.